On today's episode of the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast, Maxwell Baumbach and I are going to help you, the listener, better understand how to evaluate the wing position in the upcoming 2026 NBA Draft with some of our best tips and insights learned from years of scouting.
You are Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings, your daily podcast on the future stars of the NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Nathan Grubel, current No Ceilings contributor, scouting consultant, evaluator of prospects for the last 14 years. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network and are available wherever you get your podcasts as well as on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is closer than you think, and right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets. Download the FanDuel.com app to get started. Joining me this week is my co-host, lead columnist, creator of the No Stone Unturned series for No Ceilings, Maxwell Baumbach. Maxwell, we're back. How are we doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about wings, and I'm specifically excited to talk about the wings in this class. We've got some big boys that we're going to cover in our final segment today, and I'm really excited to touch on them.
100%. We're going to hit on some big prospects today. We've been covering a lot of sleepers, some names that fans of the NBA draft certainly need to get to know, but Max and I are going to start hitting some big dogs over the next few weeks. So on today's episode, we're going to go through some of our best tips and insights for scouting the wing position for the upcoming 2026 NBA draft class. We'll hit on some of the key skills and traits we're watching out for on offense, as well as on defense in relation to the position. And we'll wrap up by going over some examples of wings who exhibit these skills and traits that we're high on preseason in this upcoming class. Spoiler alert, you have a lot of conversations about some potential top 3 prospects. So make sure you tune in. Make sure you stay tuned to us. But before we get started, I do want to shout out the other members of the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings team, both Tyler Rucker and Tyler Metcalf. Just released an episode covering the top small forward prospects in this upcoming class. And Corey Telva and Albert Gim released an episode covering potential top 5 sleeper in North Carolina's Caleb Wilson. I had a blast listening to that episode in particular. Caleb Wilson's someone who had a little bit of a tough time evaluating over the last few weeks, but their episode certainly got me a little bit higher on his promise. So make sure you go listen or watch those wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Maxwell, how to scout wings, offensive side of the ball. We want to run through just a few tips here, go back and forth in terms of some things that you and I have really been watching closely as far as us studying wing prospects who have come into the last few drafts, and even going a little bit further back than that, right? So when we're evaluating the wing position, I think it's important to really try to define what we're specifically talking about. So we covered guards in our first episode of this How to Scout series, and how I see a guard is someone who's more of a 1-2 or a 2-1, not necessarily scaling up towards that 3 position. Essentially on offense, they're either bringing the ball up the floor, or they're one of the first people to touch the ball. You know, you really trust them to run and initiate a lot of the offense. And then defensively, they're primarily guarding 1s and 2s in the backcourt. When we're talking about wings, obviously they're perimeter-oriented defenders, but they could potentially slide up, maybe guard some 4s. But ideally, they're covering a lot of the 6'6" to 6'8" guys on the court, maybe scaling down, covering a few point guards here and there. But then offensively, they're not necessarily starting and initiating a lot of offensive actions. Maybe they're the secondary ball handler coming off of a screen, catching, and then maybe running a pick and roll. Or maybe they're spotting up from the corners or lifting up from the corner, spacing from the wing, quick catch and shoot threes, attacking a closeout, things of that nature. They're more secondary creators rather than primaries. Although, as we know, Maxwell, in today's game in the NBA, you can have 6'8" point guards. You can have point forwards. Jokic is a point center. So a lot of this stuff, it can certainly be fluid in conversation. And so if we bring up a guy or two in this podcast who were quote unquote cheating a little bit in terms of positional context, the audience will understand where we're coming from once we break it down. So looking at wings from an offensive perspective, my first thing that I'm really trying to hit home this cycle is shooting versatility. So what do I mean by shooting versatility, right? A lot of people think of, the 3-and-D wing archetype as catch and shoot players, right? They're spotting up, easy looks, not necessarily factoring in the different types of shots they can hit, both from 3 and from 2, right? You can involve guys in a lot of different movement actions. You certainly have moments where, ball skips around, hits the last guy in the corner. He's got to certainly dribble with it, attack and close out. But also those moments where it's like 3-4 seconds left of the shot clock, you have to be able to make an off the dribble three now more than ever, right? You have to be able to step in 2 dribbles, pull up from the mid-range. And so when we break down some of the best wings in the NBA today, I never quite feel like they're ever stuck from a shooting perspective, right? It seems like they're always able to figure out what the answer on the test is and create something for themselves if something isn't necessarily created already for them. So shooting versatility for me, it's not just being able to catch and shoot from the corner. It's if that's all that you can do, you're sort of being left behind in terms of where today's NBA is. So what do you think about shooting versatility, Maxwell? How does that play into some of what you're looking for from wings as well?
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the things that this actually does tie into is just off-ball movement in general, which was the next thing I wanted to touch on. So I'll kind of tie those two together. I think a lot of times when you're saying that, people in their head might be thinking, okay, well, not every player is going to, fly off screens and run off DHOs and then shoot an off-balance three while they're turning their shoulders Cam Johnson style or anything like that. And that's not what we're saying, right? There is a lot more to it than simply being a guy who is parked in the corner versus being able to relocate off the ball, whether that's moving and replacing, lifting up into that wing spot from the corner, moving to the corner. If a guy, is 45 cutting and you're on that same baseline, making sure that you're relocating to give him space, maximizing that passing angle for him. If he gets the ball and doesn't look like his look inside, it's all about just finding ways to maximize space, maximize your own openings, and then being able to capitalize on that when you get the ball. And then that ties into cutting too, right? I think cutting, I think it's one of those things where it's like under and overvalued in some senses. I think a lot of times guys will only cut and like that's like all they can do. And people will be like, oh, he's a great cutter. And it's like, well, that's kind of all he does. And he does it because he doesn't want to shoot. There's a real art to cutting. There's a real art when you do it, where the primary ball handler is in that action when you decide to do it. When you've got those, a lot of times if a guy's driving from the 45-degree angle, you want to cut baseline, vice versa. If the guy's driving baseline, you can cut from that 45-degree angle. It's all about finding those little opportunities, knowing when to do it, and then capitalizing when you see your man drifting off the ball and taking advantage of those situations as well. The ability to just move and play off the ball and constantly relocate to maximize your own opportunities, but also the opportunities for your team is something that I'm always looking for. I don't like guys that just sort of stand around or have their hands on their hips and aren't engaging based on what is developing around them, either through the means of the primary initiator or how the defense is moving. You got to be reacting on the court.
100%. Whether you're a star level player or you're a role player, you have to be able to move without the ball and sort of take advantage of opportunities when they're right in front of you. Like if we want to bring up an NBA example of what that looks like, I can't think of the word cutting anymore and not think about Jalen Williams for the Thunder. It's not just because the Thunder just won the title. Like when he first came into the NBA out of Santa Clara, that was one of the big things we noticed about Jalen Williams, right? He's 6'5" and he's long. He has that 7'2" wingspan, but he didn't necessarily come in as prolific of an on-ball player as he's now become. He had plenty of experience doing those things at Santa Clara, but he really started making his money for the Thunder by being an off-ball cutter, right? Someone who would take advantage of those opportunities. You talked about taking the right angles. He did a lot of that. And then when he caught the ball, cut, he didn't waste any dribbles. He'd take one dribble. He's either at the basket or he's redirecting that ball and sending it to where it needs to go. And that ties into my other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is the ability to attack closeouts, but in tandem with that live dribble decision-making, right? Yeah. So playing hot potato with the basketball, not holding on to it, knowing where you need to go, knowing where defenders are, playing the chess game of where you think defenders are going to be, and then making sure that you're keeping the ball moving and not being the guy who runs into a brick wall, forces it, gets a turnover forced on him, and then all of a sudden other team's going down and you're in the negatives in the points allowed column. So you really need to be focused on not just dribbling with the ball in a straight line, but really playing that chess game and figuring out, where's the help coming from? Who's the low man? Is somebody about to double team you off the wing? Can you make the skip pass to the opposite wing? Can you find that open shooter? Like all those different things on a basketball court, it's all quick decision-making like you and I have been talking about across multiple episodes now. That's really the biggest thing going from college to pro, when you're scouting is those guys who are really making those snappy, quick half-second decisions because it matters so much. It's not just being able to take the space. It's what do you do with the space that matters.
Totally. I think decisiveness is so important. And obviously like there's just the big, like, it's good to make a decision in 0.5 seconds, but even like to go a layer deeper, it's like reading the specific closeout to you. If a guy is closing out short, making sure that you're taking that opportunity. If a guy's flying by, knowing how to attack the basket, having an answer and a counter to that. To your point, the live dribble decision making. All right, now you're going downhill. Which angle are you driving at? Are you going at a 45-degree angle? Okay, where's the low man? Are you driving through the nail? If you're driving through the nail, be ready for that stunt and recover coming from the other wing. Like, it's all those little things and being able to have the floor mapped and then adapting to what the defense is giving you on the go. There's so many times where we'll watch college players and like, it's like somebody slams on the brakes because, hey, there's a short closeout. I don't really know how to handle it. I'm going to take one dribble. Now I'm picking up my dribble. The defense is swarming me. There's so many bad situations guys can get into when they don't have that ability to keep their process fluid and react and continue to play at that high pace of speed. And when they get to the NBA, you really see guys struggle with it. Max Lewis was a guy I loved coming out of college, and that's something that he's had a really hard time with at the pro level. Is the game felt fast for him at times at Pepperdine. You know what I mean? And then he gets to the NBA and he's still having these turnover problems in the G League and things like that. It's a big part of what's troubled him. And I think that's been a big lesson for me, is continuing to value players that can make those decisive plays at a high level. And a guy like Jalen Williams, you mentioned, was polar opposite. He really knew how to make decisions on the ball, be reliable, and be quick in his mental process at Santa Clara.
100%. I think in today's NBA, if you can't be trusted to put the ball on the deck in some form or fashion, you're kind of just dead in the water. And there are a few exceptions to that rule, like Jalen Wells out of Washington State came in with the Memphis Grizzlies. Not necessarily the best put the ball on the deck guy and really attack the basket and finish at a high level. He certainly had some up and down moments with that in the NBA, but he's just one of those incredible off-ball movement shooters. I mean, he's hitting those no-dip threes like they're nothing at different points through an NBA game. So it's this type of special shooter that he is. You can be an exception to that rule, but that kind of ties everything together, brings it around full circle. You have to have versatility in your game. And if you can't shoot the basketball, if you can't put the ball on the deck, if you can't make quick decisions, you're just striking out today in today's NBA. So we're going to take a quick break. When we return to the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast, Maxwell and I are going to go over some tips for scouting wings when it comes to the defensive end of the floor. Stay tuned. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel as a sports bettor because they have an enormous number of markets to bet and things to bet on, especially when it comes to the NFL. You have same-game parlays, alternate lines, anytime touchdown scores. Makes it easy to craft a bet slip that gives you the best chance to win big. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Thank you for making Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings your first listen of the day. Moving into our second segment, Maxwell, we're going to provide some tips around how we evaluate wings from a defensive perspective to give you, the listeners, some behind-the-scenes insight on what we're looking for in this upcoming class. Maxwell, why don't you start us off? What's your first thing you're looking for from wings in terms of defense?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I'm always just looking at, this is sort of a more general point, we can get into the specifics of it later, is it goes back to something you talked about with the guards, which is, what is your physical skill set and how is that going to benefit you or be to your advantage or your disadvantage if we're dealing with somebody that might struggle on the defensive end? I think it's really important, like when we talked about those positional groups and how the positional spectrum is a lot looser and more broad than it used to be, I still just like to look at how big a guy is. You know, how long are your arms? What do you weigh? And then who are you going to be comfortable matching up with based on that? And then if so, like, how far behind the curve are you in a given sense? How many positions are you going to be pigeonholed into guarding? If you have an exceptional tool, is it something that you're able to maximize through your speed? There's a lot of players that can get a lot of steals in college, but a guy like Keon Ellis, who's someone I've thought about a lot this offseason, had the speed to continue to make those plays at the next level. Conversely, we've seen guys like, if you want to throw like a Sam Hauser into this group, you know, poor stock rates in college, but you watch him, he just knows how to be in the way. And he's a big, physical, strong
He
dude.
knows where he needs to be at all times.
Yes,
right?
He's in the right spots, and he has a body that makes guys uncomfortable. So that's what one of the first things I'm looking at is just how big are you? How do you move? Who wins the bump battle? And then where positionally can I play you on the floor based on that? That's kind of just broad, big picture where I like to start on the defensive tape.
Physical tools are always something that you and I are looking at when we're evaluating prospects, and an average positional height, weight, length, they all vary from position to position. But when we're talking about wings, generally on average, about 6'6", about 210, 215 pounds. The NBA is looking for guys who have 6'9", 6'10" wingspan. So we're talking about at least like a +3, +4 wingspan at that wing position. And that is to take away a lot of space from where the offense can operate, right? If you have enough of those guys on the perimeter, all of a sudden, when you're digging down, when you're switching, when you're covering ground, when you're playing passing lanes, you're making those windows where offensive players are able to operate very narrow. And eventually you just get to a point where you better be a pristine passer as a guard or a wing on the opposite side of the ball if you're expected to get past some of these defensive rotations. It's not just the Thunder. I think about a team, even like what the Houston Rockets were able to do on defense last year, right? With Amen Thompson, Tari Eason. I mean, these guys were flying around. They were the twin terrors off the bench defensively. But even someone like a Jabari Smith, right? Who you were very high on him pre-draft a few years ago, but he's another one of these guys who doesn't necessarily have like that elite speed and foot coordination, but he's another one of these guys. He's massive. He's 6'10". He's long. He knows where to be. He's very aggressive in challenging shots, getting after guys. So when you put together an entire defense of those types of players, especially when we're talking about these big wings on the perimeter, you make life just so hard for other teams to score on. And that ties into where I was going to go with my first point, which is the ability to guard 1 through 4, right? And really having that switchability to your game. A lot of that goes into not just your physical tools in terms of your length and your height. It also falls into your strength, right? Like how sturdy are you? Are guys moving through you, or are you able to hold your own, kind of use your chest like you've talked about multiple times, Maxwell, and just have guys bounce off of you so you're dictating that space and that possession? Are you able to move your feet well laterally? Are you able to, or do you have the type of fluid hips to be able to move and navigate through narrow ball screen situations? A lot of that stuff in today's NBA, it matters so much because you can't have these weak spots on the floor. I understand. And when we talked about the guard position, we mentioned it. There are certain matchups that other teams are just going to be able to dictate. But at the same time, those guys are probably so prolific offensively that whatever you're taking from them, they're taking back from you. And they're potentially doing it not just from 2, but from 3. So you can in turn end up winning that math battle at the end of the day. But when we're talking about the wing position, and even when we'll get to the forwards position the next time we do one of these podcasts, it's about guarding your position, but it's also about helping out those other guards on your side. It's about helping out other positions. Switchability just matters so much. And then I'll just connect this right into my second point. Then I'll let you wrap up with what your second point is. A lot of that switchability also comes from communication on defense. And that is so important. It's something that you and I talk about a bunch off the air when we're texting back and forth. But seeing these guys in person as often as you can, if you want to be a scout, it matters so much because you're not always going to pick up on that on film. You can try and read some lips. Maybe you're watching a game where they're in a smaller gym. It's a quieter setting. You can pick up on some of those auditory things. But when you're really seeing these guys in person, if you're able to go to a practice, you're seeing coaches drill that into their players nonstop. Everyone has to talk. Everyone has to communicate. Where's someone else rotating? Where's this offensive player cutting to? How are we going to play the pick and roll? Are they switching up one of their schemes? You have to always be calling something out to someone else because you never know when that last call out's going to help them get themselves together and ultimately make a play on the ball, get a stop, contest, close out on a shot. You never know when it's your words that are also able to impact not just what you're doing, but what the next guy's doing. So communication from the wing position is so important. I feel like we only talk about communication from like the big spot because we're kind of like the captain of the defense.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like that's the only time we talk about communication, but there's so many other layers to it. I know that you can speak to that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love guys like where I just see him like visibly talking and pointing on film. Like it always makes an impression on me. And I was having a conversation with a player over the offseason where like I told him, like, I've never had a coach or a front office complain to me and say, you know, he talks too much on defense. Like it's only good. It's only good. If you know how to play defense, you should be running your mouth out on the court and telling guys where to go. And I want to tie into that decisiveness. We talked about it on offense. It's every bit as true on defense. You need to be able to process the game quickly. And I feel like defensive processing is something that we talk about again with rim protectors. It's, are they in the right spot? Whatever. That's every bit as important on the perimeter at the NBA level. You need to know when to rotate, where to be going. Is it an X out? Is this a guy you need to close out on hard? Is it a guy you can close out on soft? Is it a flyby situation? You have to know where everybody is, where you need to go, and how to appropriately approach that player once you are moving toward them. I think that's something that kind of gets underlooked because I think a lot of times defense gets a little too simplified in terms of how we talk about it. But I look for that same type of decisiveness on the defensive end as I do on offense, because when a guy is consistently behind the play, when the offense is humming, that can get you played off the floor. Nothing is going to drive an NBA coach crazier than a guy being a step behind rotationally time and time again.
Absolutely, especially from the wing spot. So when we come back to the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast, we'll do a quick breakdown on some of the top wings in the upcoming 2026 NBA Draft class who exhibit these skills and traits that we outlined for their position on both offense and defense. Stay tuned. All right, our last segment for today's episode of the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast. I'm coming to Maxwell first to give us a wing prospect in the upcoming 2026 NBA Draft class who exhibits most or all of our offensive and defensive skills / traits we outlined in our first two segments that we're looking for in players at this position. Maxwell, you're good. We talked about this beforehand. You can cheat a little bit. The wing position in this draft class, and we'll be sure to hit on this in multiple episodes, at near the top preseason, it's looking a little thin. So we're probably blurring a few lines talking about the two players we're bringing up, but we wanted to hit on some of the big boys. We want to have some fun with this one. So who's the prospect you wanted to talk about?
Let's talk about Darryn Peterson, 6'6" freshman out of Kansas. I believe was the number one prospect on our initial way too early board that we did as a group. Let's start with the defense here, since we were just talking about it. Visibly long arms, another guy that we see talking out on the floor. He's got that physical speed and intimidation ability that I like, where he's going to force guys to turn the ball over. He can turn that defense right into offense. But again, can cover ground, can close out hard, knows where to go, gets there in a hurry, gets high off the floor. And at the point of attack, good reactivity in his feet. I really like the positional versatility that's going to be on the table for him, as well as his just ability to play off the ball within a team concept. Offensively, he's got a lot of those things that we look for, right? He's able to get to the rim fast. He has a decisiveness. He has that bounce to finish above the rim when he's run off the three-point line, but he still has that on-ball juice that is required in the modern league. He can create separation east-west. He can blow by a guy. He can read the defense and react to help downhill. He's got some really slick deliveries that he's able to make on the go without having to slow himself down. It just feels like there's this wonderful marriage between his ability to process the game and his physical tools that makes him, in my opinion, the most intriguing prospect in the 2026 NBA draft.
I'm very excited for Darryn Peterson. I can't wait to see him in person in just a few short months. Corey Telebo and I will be in New York at the Champions Classic, Duke versus Kansas. That's going to be an incredible game. He'll be matched up against my number one overall prospect and Cam Boozer, who we're going to talk about a little bit later down the line, a few episodes from now. But yeah, Darryn Peterson, very intriguing combo guard / wing. I do think he can fit more of the wing mold, Maxwell. And I think that, we're going to see how his experimental run goes at Kansas. I know that they're going to want to try to put him on the ball as much as possible and put him in like that point wing type of role. But he can succeed in a lot of different ways, like you mentioned, off the ball as well. I do think the shooting versatility for him is going to be a legitimate feather in his cap. I do think he has the type of shot that he can get quickly off the move. I think he's going to be able to create his own 3-point shot off the dribble from a spot up standpoint. I think all of those elements are going to be there for him. He'll be a freshman. He will have some ups and downs throughout the season, but I do think more games than not, we're going to see that shooting really be not just a green light for him in terms of volume, but I do think he's going to be a better shooter potentially from an efficiency standpoint than advertised. Defensively is where I think it gets very interesting for him, because I do think when you look at some of the high school film, there's some moments where you might want to see a little bit more from him defensively, but I think you mentioned he's already grown to be 6'6". He has that length. He has the type of build where I think he's going to add on some real muscle, some real bulk, but his frame is evenly distributed. Excuse me, I stuttered a little bit there, but his frame is evenly distributed to where I don't think a lot of that weight is going to kill him in a bad way. Like, it's not going to slow him down or take away from his explosiveness or his vertical pop. I think he's going to fill out naturally, get a lot stronger, and that's going to help him guard up and down the lineup. I think he's going to be able to handle some threes, and very similar to some of the other, bigger combo guards that we have in the NBA, they can also hold their own on fours when they're matched up against the bigger body. I think I see a lot of that in Peterson's future. You mentioned how he processes the game, how he sees it, how I keep hearing behind the scenes he's one of the most vocal guys that trainers and other people are working with behind the scenes. So that's always great feedback to hear. I'm very excited for what Peterson's going to look like at Kansas. Can't wait to see him in person. I wanted to bring up AJ Dybantsa, big jumbo wing creator, 6'9", one of the more divisive prospects all of a sudden in this preseason 2026 NBA draft class. But listen, he's uber talented, gets to the free throw line a ton, a physical finisher at the basket, and above the rim guy at the basket. We talked about, having size 6'9", so plus positional size for the wing position, plus positional length with a reported 7-foot plus wingspan. Defensively, Maxwell, this guy's a monster. And yep. I watched some high school stuff here and there before we get to the preseason process, really the summer before an incoming draft classes when I try to go back and watch more of the high school tape. But the bonus this cycle was being able to watch the FIBA U19s, which we talked about. We highlighted, Michael Brown a lot during that podcast, and then Christian Anderson and Heinz Steinbach on the German side. We mentioned AJ with Team USA, but really what popped and what continued to pop and what I keep hearing conversations about is his defensive impact as a wing. He has that switchability, that versatility that we're looking for. He has awesome feet. He has quick hands. He's an excellent decision maker, both on the ball defensively and off the ball. He is one of the loudest guys that we consistently hear on the floor as a communicator. Like, to me, when you draft near the top of a lot of these classes, we're primarily projecting these players as offensive number one options, and that's really where you're getting a lot of the versatility and the bread and butter from. We're not necessarily talking about these guys defensively, although we do see more often than not, if you're a top player in the NBA, you're playing both ways. But with AJ, he's going to be really interesting, Maxwell, because the defense is going to be the primary first and foremost selling point for him. Then we sort of get to his on-ball playmaking potential as a pick-and-roll operator, as a second-side guy. We do unfortunately have to get to the jump shot, which is an intriguing layer. And I'm very curious where you're at quickly on his jump shot, because when I watch him, it's funny, right? Because I don't necessarily see one standout red light glaring thing with his jump shot. I actually think he's pretty consistent with it more often than not, but his misses are very inconsistent. Like, he's short on some misses. He's hitting the back of the rim on some misses. He's hitting the backboard on some other misses. Like, is there anything that stands out to you with his shot that maybe we can look for some improvement from him his freshman year at BYU?
I want to see the release point be higher. That's like the biggest thing that jumped out to me during those FIBA games, where it's just sort of low. It's a little pushy. It can be a bit flat coming out of his hand. I want to see a bit higher of a release point, a bit more arc on it, and see where it goes. I don't think it's totally broken. He's always made free throws at a respectable level based on the data that I've seen, but I think that needs to come along. Can I sneak in some talk on our guy Braylon Mullins real quick? Out of
Oh,
UConn?
you sure can. I was so torn in trying to
Yeah.
pick him. I thought he skewed more towards the combo guard role at the
Sure.
end of the day when I went back in the film, but absolutely talk about Braylon Mullins, freshman for UConn, really quick.
Well, just real quick, you've talked so much about shooting versatility, and I feel like he's, of the freshmen, he's probably the most versatile incoming shooter. Fast release, deep range, unreal off of movement. He's going to get so many guys assists just by virtue of like, they're just going to toss it to him in a handoff and he's going to drill a 30-footer. Like that dude is an unreal shooter. But again, it's that ability to react to that closeout, play when he's run off the line, make some really, really sharp passes on the go. Like he's just one of those guys who can really shoot. He knows how to play basketball. Defensively, I have some questions. But I think he's like a little bit better in terms of his like run jump athleticism than he gets credit for. Frame needs to come along, but like a guy I'm just really, really interested in is a potential one and done.
Can I just say really quickly, you said you have some questions on the defense, but I watched a few games back, over the last few days. I thought I was ultimately going to pick Mullins. I went with Dybantsa because I just wanted to talk about another top guy. But with Mullins, there were some moments on tape where I was actually really intrigued with what I saw defensively, like when he got switched onto a low man or like a post-up type guy. Like he would actually battle by the basket. He's a very competitive dude. Like, I understand there's going to be some times where, he gets beat off the dribble. He can get, a little bit loosey-goosey in terms of his footwork, like staying with someone on the perimeter. But I think he's a little stronger than some may give him credit for with, like you said, with his frame, plenty of room to grow in that regard. But he is competitive. He's fiery. Yeah, man, I love his offensive game. Truly, like he will be one of the most versatile shooters we have in all of college basketball next year. Like if you're trying to slot him in as one of these wing prospects who has gone very under the radar from like a potential lottery standpoint, I think Braylon Mullins, very fine name to put in there. And he's going to be on, like we said, UConn. That is a top squad. They're going to get a lot of the attention. Dan Hurley's one of the best coaches we have in college basketball. He's going to be on national TV a lot. Get ready to hear the name Braylon Mullins in a lot of your upcoming 2026 NBA draft discussions. That was a great call out from you to sneak him in at the end. But that's going to do it for us. Big shout out to each and every one of you for listening to this episode of Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings. The Locked On NBA Top 100 is here, voted on by the NBA hosts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Our Top 100 was formed by experts that cover these teams and players every day. Find the full list on Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. As always, thank you all for listening. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week.